Okay, good afternoon, everybody. The guy waving to you with glasses in a shirt, as if I'm in a tropical part of the world, but actually I'm in North Wales where there's a storm passing us, is greeting you. Welcome. Of course, our guest today, our forensic intelligence specialist, is in a nice warm part of the world. Kendrick from the Bahamas. I'll introduce him briefly. He'll say a little bit about himself. But the reason we're pleased to have this opportunity to bring the conversation, Kendrick, myself, is because we're talking about the human touch in tackling financial crime. And as a way into it, we're going to talk about Singapore, who last summer 2023, to the surprise of many people, including in Singapore, had a $2 billion US money laundering scam detected. And we'll talk a little bit about that and the role of forensic accountants. On the next slide, it introduces Kendrick. And there he is. He looks like that in the picture as well. I've met him in person. He is the real McCoy. He's not AI. He's not ChatGPT. He's not an avatar and all those other things that technology can do for us. It sets out there, managing partner, Kate Christie and Company Chartered Accountants and Fraud Examiners. Fraud, a lot of it unfortunately increased in our part of the world here during the COVID period, when attempts at fraud and fraud on unfortunate individuals who had to make use of technology to interact when they couldn't leave their homes. Cases of attempted fraud increased dramatically. You can read there that Kendrick has been a certified fraud examiner over 20 years and previously with Grant Thornton, Bahamas, a forensic partner. So lots of interesting background there, including enhancing internal audit functions, Securities Commission of Bahamas, and many other things. I'm going to set the scene with the next slide, please. And then after a couple of these, I'll ask Kendrick, first of all, to say a little bit more about himself. Kendrick and I spoke last week to try and organize a route through this, but if you've attended these webinars before, you know that they're not cast in stone. We want to hear from you. We're happy to receive your comments in chat area, typed into the chat area, and I'll draw upon them in the Q&A at the end. And you're welcome at the end also to open up your microphone and speak to us. But let me say a little bit about setting the scene, this challenge of financial intelligence, technological, human aspects. I take the example from Singapore 2023. It's an example of, first of all, detection of a criminal activity, money laundering, rapid prosecution, because only last week they prosecuted people, so it happened last summer. And here we are, early part of April. They've got the material, the evidence, they're prosecuting them. And then also the fact that they have already undertaken an urgent review of the regulations. This debate about technological or human aspects of gathering financial intelligence, interpreting it, and should it be human or should it just be solely reliant on technology, particularly for organizations who are what we may call resource poor, resource starved. Everybody is resource starved these days, including the regulators, the financial intelligence units, law enforcement, etc. But here we have 5 organizations that I've chosen who are involved in this debate of technology or human judgment. First of all, there's the Monetary Authority of Singapore, which directly relates to the example of Singapore. And I should say, I've not chosen Singapore to be critical of Singapore. There have been many other examples of money laundering elsewhere around the world. I've chosen it because of the rapid response because the Financial Action Task Force, which is FATF, listed third on the list of organizations there, is always looking at regional FATF bodies undertaking reviews of individual countries' systems, passing opinions, and then FATF expecting that governments in those individual countries will take action. Very few of them will take action faster than the example of Singapore, which I've chosen. And FATF, through their regional bodies, is keen to know what's the commitment of the government, what's the resources the government will put, what's the legislature doing to try and address these weaknesses in the systems that the regional FATF finds. So a little bit more about FATF in a moment, but the Bank of International Settlements has a view on what technology can do. So does the UK Financial Conduct Authority. And finally, the Cambridge SupTech, which is supervisory use of technology for supervision. They also have a view on it. But rather than prolong just that, let's have a quick look at the next slide, which says, only this last week, Singapore convicts the first suspect in a record money laundering case. This comes from the CNBC, the web links there if you want to have a look at it. I've opened with a quote that comes from CNBC that says that it's a case that has stunned many in Singapore and around the world, and has raised doubts over Singapore's reputation as a financial hub. Now, that's CNBC's view, and if it's correct, then of course Singapore, which sees itself as a financial hub in competition with Hong Kong, Japan to some extent, Dubai, you don't want your reputation to suffer. And that partly, I think, explains why they have responded so quickly. Last week, they sentenced the first person, Southeast Asia Islands, only a tiny place, Singapore. If you haven't been there, it's a population of 5 million, very small, very technology literate, and also a lot of observation of what's going on using technology, and the population knows that, it's no secret. And this guy, who's a Cambodian, was sentenced to 13 months. I think some people may say, well, that's not very much of a sentence, or perhaps not very much of a deterrent. The reason for indicating that he's from Cambodia is because this is taking place through Singapore, Cambodian, Chinese people involved. It's an example of, it's a multinational or multinationality activity. And the activity was discovered in August, summer last year, and they were arrested very promptly. And the value of assets seized to date in this scam is 3 billion Sing dollars, and for the US dollars, it should say 2.2 billion. So it's a not insignificant attempt at fraud. Next one, please. In a couple of days after that, the second person was sentenced. This is US dollars, 2.2 billion. And sentenced 14 months imprisonment. And again, some people will say, is this sufficient deterrent to stop people? Well, I guess if you've been caught, it is. But what's the chances of being detected? This is for resisting arrest and money laundering. This guy's a Cypriot national. So one of 10 foreigners. And what assets were they using to launder? They were using cars, luxury properties, cash and jewelry. And if you know Singapore, as I said, a small island, the cost to own a car is very, very high because you don't really need to. Good public transport. The interesting thing is that the investigation that caught these 10 foreigners from various parts of the world led to the government, an interministerial panel, reviewing anti-money laundering because they were concerned about the reputation, just as CNBC said on the opening slide, the reputation of Singapore as a financial hub. And not only looking at anti-money laundering regulations, but individual government agencies looking at the tax incentives for family offices, high value assets such as luxury cars, etc. Should they be subject to regulation so that maybe we can detect this? And the next slide is the one that brings together the idea of next slide, please, brings together the idea of technology. A bank, Singapore's DBS, their largest bank, hit heavily to the tune of around, what's that, 100 million Sing is something like 70 million US dollars. Oh, it says it there. Why am I doing the calculation when it's on the screen? Thank you, technology. 73 million because they were exposed to this activity unknowingly. The interesting thing about the monetary authority in Singapore, if the activity happened in the summer, people were arrested in autumn. Already in November, the monetary authority, the regulatory body there, is looking at how technology could be used in the fight against money laundering. You can read these at your own convenience, and there are the web links there. The final slide before we talk to Kendrick some more says, is it a panacea to use technology? Is it a be-all and end-all versus human judgment? The Bank for International Settlements says there's a growing interest in the use of technology to satisfy regulatory and compliance. Okay, that's good. The Financial Action Task Force, FATF, I've just mentioned already, just a year ago, Feb 2023, said in their recommendations, financial intelligence units are encouraged to use analytical software to process information because there's such a large volume of it. But such tools, technological tools, cannot fully replace the human judgment element, which is why we got Kendrick here. He's human. Okay, the human versus technology. The UK Financial Conduct Authority talks about the adoption of technology. Are organizations prepared for its adoption? And what that comes down to is culture. And I think Kendrick will have something to say about that in organizations. The culture, the digital native. Other terms are the categorization of digital natives as people who avoid technology, people who use technology minimally, and those who are really enthusiastic about it, so that it's aspects of internal culture and buy-in by individual members of staff that are important, as referred to in the Cambridge SocTech Lab report. Enough of me. That's just to say, here's a small country with lots of points of observation using technology, and yet they were involved in this 2.2 billion US scam, and a few indications of the response of the government. Kendrick, before we get into it, just expand a little more on your view of well, your own experience. I've talked a little bit about it, etc. And perhaps you could tell us a little bit more, not only about your own experience, about what's the role of a forensic accountant, the human version.
Yes, the human version. Good morning, everyone. Morning, Stephen, Lisa. It's good to be here. We have met in the Bahamas, where it is quite a bit warmer, I must say. I think
yes.
It's 78, 80 degrees currently. And as you were reading through the slides, Stephen, the Bahamas had its own event, a major event, a year ago with the FTX scandal. And of course, the Singaporean example is a bit more nuanced with the money laundering, but there were a lot of elements of insider trading, use of crypto coins and poor controls, and of course the Bahamas are much smaller than Singapore. I think less than 400,000 people, right off the coast of Florida, and we certainly got a lot of attention. And of course, Sam Bankman-Fried was sentenced recently to a number of years by the U.S. courts. But my experience really has been in internal audit, external audit. I actually started out as a fraud investigator almost by accident, and I guess I could share with you a quick example of what we talk about. You use the term intelligence in the heading, and it's believed that one day AI may replicate the emotional intelligence of human beings, but certainly that may be a long ways away. Um, and, we had an incident as an external auditor where this was, I think, back in the 90s, when I was an auditor at Deloitte, and we had a cash difference, and we were about to brush it off as a cash difference, and we said, hey, we have a red flag here. And those who are very familiar with the fraud use of fraud terms, red flag is an indication of some lack of internal control or some change in lifestyle or behavior that humans can pick up on, right? And then put it with the evidence to indicate that there's something amiss and to dig a little further. When we found out that the managing director had been in another island for several months, and basically had left the organization uh, to be ran by junior persons. And so, we picked up on that, and then we were able to determine that there was some fraud committed. And so, that I learned then the importance of looking at the red flags or some of the things that only humans probably can spot through knowing Stephen. Stephen wears suspenders. Stephen stops wearing suspenders. Stephen drives a Mercedes. Stephen starts to drive a Porsche. These are all things that or yaks a bit differently, right? And so these are things that I think the human use of it and my human experience will always be needed. But I would say that we must embrace technology. We must embrace the artificial intelligence, chat GPT, algorithms, and machine learning as part of our forensic accounting um, experience. And I think when we spoke earlier, we spoke about what is forensic accounting. Forensic accounting is use of your accounting knowledge with investigative skills to provide litigation support, whether it's a fraud case, it could be a divorce proceeding, embezzlement, any nature, but built with the evidence, not with the feeling of the person or the company that has hired you as to whether someone is guilty. And of course, we'll speak later about the use of empathy, which I think humans will always be useful for, is having empathy and having a sense of independence in everything we do. The Bahamas was on the center stage. There were persons who were basically, lambasting the Bahamas in this FTX, and we got a lot of negative press, and the Bahamas was able to, I wouldn't say totally move on from it, but certainly now it is moving a little further away, and we've learned from the experience, and that's what humans do, of course, as algorithms and artificial intelligence, learn from experience as well. But definitely, good to be here, and good to have met you. You visited the Bahamas when I was I'm still president of the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, and I'm really glad to be given this opportunity to share with your audience.
Great, thanks for that introduction. Let me pick up on some of the key characteristics. You were explaining having accounting knowledge and a forensic toolkit, which must include technology, but also human empathy to build evidence. The characteristic of human empathy, of course, and emotional intelligence, and the legal phrase innocent until proved guilty, which presumably still applies in these situations, and it's about organizing the evidence. The importance of an independent mindset is something I think you've just referred to. Can you tell us a little bit more about this independent mindset? And you talked also about where the evidence takes as opposed to where people want the evidence to lead.
Right. No, definitely. It's certainly something that's required required of any fraud examiner, but also something that I personally practice, having done let's say about 20 or more different forensic engagements, various small, medium, or large composition. Usually, I remember in one instance, I like to use examples, Stephen, of a chairman of a board, chairman calling me on a forgery matter where there was an executive that was suspected to have forged a signature on a document. Basically, the document was that of a deceased person who had left this executive as a beneficiary, and there was speculation that the signatures on the form or the beneficiary form were forged. And the chairman basically had already convicted this executive. He said, we're going to hire you. We're already of the view that this person has committed this. I said, well, what, I asked the chairman, what is this based on? He said, well, I just don't like this person. I don't believe that, that this is a true and valid form. And I went in. We took an independent mindset. I even had to sort of bring my accountants in the line, my forensic accountants in the line that follow the evidence. And we basically were able to conclude based on signature examination and other aspects of the relationship between the beneficiary and this executive that everything was normal. There was no signs of forgery. And so I had many examples to share. That usually it's a call that's based on emotion, and it's based on the fact that just a tip or an allegation being made about someone is indication that they're guilty. And we might pretend to be persons that are independent in mindset, but we oftentimes as a collective, base it on just spurious information. The fact that Stephen is accused is proof for a lot of people that Stephen has done what the accuser has labeled him or her him with. And so I take that independent mindset as a real strong, something that I practice. And I oftentimes find that the cases that we do result in evidence that would lead to proof of the allegation and oftentimes lead to the person being vindicated. And that's how I sleep at night, Stephen, because, I have people who come up and say, oh, you were the one who aided this person, assisted this person in committing this fraud. And I said, well, there was no evidence to prove, and we took it to court. And also, in some instances the evidence shows that this person was not involved at all. And so we really have to think about false accusations. And that's why we have to have the independent mindset. We go based on the evidence, even though the emotion or even verbal evidence sometimes, or verbal statements can say that this is this person is accused and this person is guilty. But I look at the evidence and we keep an independent mindset.
Yeah, that leads to quite an interesting idea that if humans, particularly those in the example you were saying, have already made their judgment. I don't like this guy. Well, that could be one argument for using technology. Technology doesn't have this particular human characteristic. And when you talk about false accusations, of course, there are false positives as well. Technology often generates false positives. You had quite an interesting story about the iris and the perception that people hold once somebody has been accused, and trying to unravel for their own career, trying to unravel. Well, yes, it turned out to be a false accusation, but often what people remember is, but they were accused. There's no smoke without fire. What about the false positives that arise through technology?
Right, and that's where there's a lot of accounting firms and other consulting firms that are positioning themselves as auditors of the AI. I guess the larger businesses, the bigger firms, sort of position themselves as having more resources to even come out with their own AI software or applications. But there are other entities that specialize in checking the system behind AI, because as you said, there could be false, and there will be false positives. I mean, we've had AI robots talking about wiping mankind off the earth. There's been issues with diversity in terms of persons of a certain race being targeted, for unfairly in facial recognition. So those things happen, and as you said, the AI is being programmed by the experience of the humans behind it. That information, and that information can be biased. Even we know that there's certain aspects of history, for instance, that have, as they say, the history is left to the winners, right? Or however that phrase goes.
Yeah.
The winners or the victors tell the story, and they oftentimes, leave out a lot of details. And so that as that AI learns and gathers more information, we have to ensure that that information is more diverse, not only in terms of race, but in terms of gender, in terms of experience, in terms of the many different factors, so that there's a fairness about it and there's no bias. But I would say to you that there are going to be outliers, right? As I use example of you have a boarding pass. There are certain airlines now that are testing the iris scanning, and what happens if you're boarding a flight and your iris is scanned and you're denied entry, and there's no reason for you to have been denied entry, but the public around you convicts you, right? And they might even take a picture or two of you not, and so we can't be all things, but we have to be mindful that there will be false positives. And I think I use with exactly the point about having empathy as well. I have empathy when I do my examinations. I have independence, but I also have empathy that this could be me. This could be me being accused of this, this whatever allegation it is, fraud or money laundering or defalcation, and I have to keep that in front of me so that even though I may not like the individual, usually we encounter sometimes very, different types of characters in these investigations, and we also have to tone, sort of put that to the side as well, because sometimes the persons have personal issues, and so you still have to investigate it fairly. And so empathy and independence are what definitely any forensic, hopefully there's some persons in your audience that are wanting to pursue this as a profession. You really have to not only be technically superior, but also have empathy and have independence in what you do.
Yes, you were talking about, well, the title of our talk is Financial Intelligence, and then we've been talking about artificial intelligence, and you also said a little earlier about emotional intelligence and the ability to relate, to show empathy to people in these situations and follow where the evidence leads. One of the things that one might ask is, of course, there are compliance functions in many organizations, internal compliance. They're placed often under quite difficult situations. The board of the company tells the compliance function, keep our name out of the headlines, keep our name clean. And at the same time, the board is saying to those people who are generating business and generating the profit, we need to go for some high returns and things. And there may be tension in there. When you talk about having independence and empathy, do you think that these forensic activities can be adequately carried out by internal stakeholders with regard to the way that the company internally perceives it, and indeed external stakeholders? Is there a greater credibility of somebody external to the organization about this forensic activity?
Yes, it's a good question, and again, I wear many hats. I also my firm serves as internal auditor of a number of entities in the Bahamas, and I must say that in those cases we are outsourced, and that's done not only for the independence but also for efficiency. You versus the market in the Bahamas in terms of is sometimes very limited, and so you have an internal auditor that may be a very good accountant, but may not have the technology experience, may not have the cryptocurrency experience or compliance experience. And so, in our case, our firm has those resources, and we can, plus the internal audit methodology. And of course, it's also probably more efficient financially for those entities to outsource the internal audit function. But I'm a believer in having that function be independent. Even as obviously a financial statement auditor, we must be independent. We must be obviously not, be engaged with the company to be the accountant and do their auditing. That's a no-no in the auditing world. But in terms of internal auditing, I think that it's very, I use the example of you have we used to determine the old days of dirtying your hands. You already employed by the company. You had the water cooler. You meaning that you are paid by this entity directly. You have you're encountering these persons at the parties, and so there's sometimes a tendency to lose your independence or to hesitate because you are very familiar with the individuals who, and so that's why it's good to have an independent mindset. I think the perception as well. Perception is one that is better to have that independent auditor or investigator in other cases come in, and basically they have no skin in, they basically have no skin in the game. They're coming in and they're looking at the facts as they are, and so it's better to be to enact it in perception and not only in the reality, but perception. Sometimes we do things because of the perception, rather than just the reality of it.
Yes, and of course, some of the very large auditing firms have been criticised for being too close to the companies they are supposedly independently auditing.
Right.
And when things blow up, people have a look and they say, well, you gave them a clean bill of health. You never mentioned anything like this. So yeah, you wonder whether or not there almost ought to be a regulation, because we are moving to bringing in global accounting standards, etc., that says you can only audit a company for so many years, and then for fear of you becoming too empathetic in the wrong way, too much time in the water cooler and at the parties and things, that it should change by regulation.
Right. And I think also for new perspectives, I mean, in terms of the auditor, I've been on the external audits where, I recall one time where at Deloitte, we took over an engagement, a partner had been on for about, I would say 7 or 8 years. And of course, in these days, you're supposed to be rotated out after, I believe, 6 or 7 years. But,
Yeah.
We were at a board meeting and the new partner, he asked a question as to, something about why do you have this deadline 1 month after your financial year end? And they couldn't answer it, but that's the way they'd done it for the past 6 years. And so sometimes that new perspective, and of course they ended up changing it, so that new perspective, having a new auditor come in, not only helps you with independence, but also helps you with new perspective, new way of auditing, a new way of looking at something, and that it results in meaningful observations and meaningful results for the company itself. So new perspective is important as well because if you're been doing the audit for so many years, you tend to work on the tried and true, and so there's a need for auditor rotation for independence, but also for new perspective. New auditor trying to prove themselves as a good auditor. And so that oftentimes results in new, pain and heartache for the client because they get a lot of questions and probing, but it also results in meaningful, insights into the company itself because of the new perspective.
Yeah, and I think that's right. You talk about it's almost like a new broom coming in, not exactly sweeping clean, but probing into the recesses that doing the due diligence that other people have perhaps become a little bit complacent about. But it's not only the auditor function that might do that, it could be the organization. They've been cozy for too long thinking, well, why do we do it this way? And perhaps we do need to improve it. So of course the auditing activity is not intended solely just to say rubber stamp, yeah, this is fine, or to find lots of holes, but to work with the company to be transparent and move things forward, including the introduction of new processes and technologies into the organization being examined. We'll open up for questions in a moment, and then at the end we have a couple of slides just to say, if you want to develop the human touch to understanding financial crime, we here at Bangor, we've got exactly the program for you. But of course, that's the plug that comes later. The thing I wanted to ask you in your experience of technology, and we've touched upon it a little, at the moment, it has very little empathy. It has little emotional intelligence. It can scan through large quantities. And I just go back to what the in the case study we very briefly looked at, the Monetary Authority of Singapore. It was on the slide. I didn't read it out. We already use machine learning and advanced data analytics to detect fraud and other suspicious activities, they say. Well, in that case, why didn't you find it earlier? Oh, I shouldn't say things like that. But money launderers operate across different financial institutions and geographies, and in order to combat them, money launderers, that is, monetary authorities need to be able to join the dots across them, and AI can do that according to the Monetary Authority of Singapore, beyond the ability of the human brain. Beyond the ability of the human brain. But as you said a few minutes ago, actually, technology is written by, in the first event, or has been so far, written by humans, and humans have either unintended perspectives, perhaps they're even unaware of them. But when we get to the stage where artificial intelligence self-replicates, maybe we'll move away from some of these individual software writers, the humans, but we still have this challenge of empathy. Can you say a little bit more about whether you consider technology ever can be empathetic? Because it's beyond human. It's from human, but not human itself.
Right. Well, I think I'll say to you too that there are weaknesses. I mean, for instance, I see you and myself wearing eyeglasses. Other persons have issues, and so the artificial intelligence, in terms of examining situations where you have a lot of transactions, financial statement fraud, for instance, artificial intelligence and using the machine learning bots proves to be very useful because there's so many transactions. It becomes very difficult for humans to keep up with it, and the cost of humans basically analyzing that data, and also not only analyzing it, but also doing the relationship between various accounts. The AI certainly is very useful and is recommended in that regard, right? Where there's no need for empathy, just the bot is programmed to look at every transaction over 5,000, and to also relate it to other factors, and so that usually is recommended. So I would say, I know a number of accountants or professionals sometimes are very wary of using technology, but we almost have to use it. And I see, a lot of entities are embracing it in terms of those transactions, analyzing financial statements for unusual patterns and numbers. It becomes very difficult for human beings to do that on a grand scale, right? But your question of empathy, I don't know. I know that my feeling is that there are some with the quantum computing and where we are now, technology-wise, there'll be moments of where the AI will replicate something that we may call intelligence or emotional, but I think we're not there yet. I know there've been studies on it, and certainly it has intelligence. There are intelligence plays a big factor in it, but emotional intelligence is something. We see, for instance, when we do investigations, how we expect a certain person to act in a situation may be different from how the person acted, because the person has so many different experiences, and human beings have so many nuances, and that is very hard to predict what a person will do, right? And so I think there's a bit of randomness in there as well. And it's I don't think we're there yet. Maybe 1,000 years from now, we can be close. Certainly, what's happening now is very fascinating, right? With the robots that can, there's an example of a robot that can do gymnastics better than, or supposedly better than a regular professional. And so there's certainly replication of the physical attributes, right? Whether we're there now, I don't think so, right? But certainly, I would say that we should, I use ChatGPT, daily. Of course, we use bots for certain investigations and for especially for financial statement transactions and trying to spot any abnormalities in financial statements or financial data. Bots are recommended. They just do the job. There's no need to. They don't know who the client is. The bot is just programmed to look at these transactions and come out with a specific result. And of course, people use them in trading and use them in cryptocurrency and all of that. And so they're quite useful, and they take us just like Stephen, our eyeglasses and everybody else's, right? It helps us. It becomes part of the daily process. I mean, but it helps us to see better, and it's just like a tool like anything else.
Yes, I think that's right, and of course, the reason why financial institutions or organizations of any kind need to be aware of the limitations of technology and the benefit of human judgment is if you allow technology complete free rein and it red flags various transactions as suspicious and then parks them or passes them up to a higher authority, actually there may be an innocent explanation, but because you do that, you're no longer going to trade with that customer or whatever, and therefore you park that customer. The customer may not be able to find financial services or services elsewhere, or a little bit of human investigation and understanding of what I think you called randomness in the system and randomness in behavior. The human can do that. The technology is unable to. The final thing in drawing things to a close, I think you've taken us through a broad appreciation of the need for technology. Still, for the foreseeable future, you seem to be echoing what Financial Action Task Force says. Yeah, we also need to have such tools cannot fully replace the human judgment element of analysis, at least for the next few years. Your job is safe, Kendrick. The jobs of the humans in our audience and hopefully myself as well. But the final thing about randomness in the system and behavior takes us back to one of the quotations I had in the slide a little earlier. Technological panacea versus human judgment. Within any organization, any client you're looking at, there are, we may call them different segments. People who avoid the use of technology, digital methods, people who use them minimally, and people who are enthusiastic. And that's part of the challenge for us all, to understand randomness and for the foreseeable future, the contribution that humans can make in interpreting and judging, rather than just automatically red flagging due to technology and passing it all the way up to the next stakeholder in the chain, who also is probably under-resourced. Financial intelligence units, they don't have enough resource. Law enforcement doesn't have enough resource. It's in everybody's interest in the financial ecosystem to have a balanced approach to this that says technology contributes, so does human analysis. I'm going to open it up for any questions now. Now's the time for you either to unmute and speak or to type questions in the chat area. The chat area you can find by going to, on my screen, it's on the top level, it's called chat. It opens up a little box where you can type a message. Who wants to start us off by asking Kendrick a question? Don't be shy. This is your human chance to do it, using technology or unmuting. Just while you're thinking about questions, Kendrick, you talked about the publicity that Bahamas got over FTX. Incidentally, Bangor University was in the Bahamas round about that time. We are not at all connected with FTX, okay? We need to be clear about that one. Right. But just as Singapore was concerned about reputational damage, you said for a time Bahamas had a lot of negative press. I don't want you to, in any sense, to incriminate yourself, but has the Bahamas regulatory authorities, etc., have they taken any appreciation of a need to improve, whatever it be?
I wanted to, that's a very good question, and I wanted to use the example while we waited for any questions about you talked about the human interaction, and I'm a believer that humans will always be involved in some form, with AI, whether it's to look at the data and make a decision or flag, an event, and as you intimated, the fact that something is flagged by AI should not be that it's just an automatic, in some cases, I guess, an automatic suspension of activity or whatever negative consequence it is. It could be that there's a highlighted item and the human has to intervene. But in the FTX, and I'll answer your question, the FTX event, one of the things that the Bahamas government did through the Securities Commission was to freeze the crypto wallets. And I say that I remember that that the crypto wallets, in the case of the impending liquidation, the Securities Commission was able to obtain a court order and to transfer the crypto holdings into an offsite wallet. Again, I don't pretend to know all of the details, but I know that there were a lot of persons who criticized that move. And with my I took a cryptocurrency investigator course to understand the cryptocurrency, and I must say that is actually that was really a brilliant move, and that is a strategy that normally fraud investigators do, right? That when they encounter somebody who's under suspicion, and has a crypto wallet, literally the proceeds of the crypto wallet can be removed while you sit there with the interviewing the person, right? And so there's a common technique. Let's transfer to what we call a cold wallet, right, which is a storage center that is not touchable and no one can get to. And so I remember that point coming up as to, because I do liquidations myself. I do a lot of stuff. And there was, when a liquidation is happening, normally there's nothing, everything freezes. You can't sell a faucet, you can't sell a car. But that was actually a very good move on their part to ensure that some of the assets were, and that was a human move. That was no bot or out of AI. That was someone sitting there saying, "Hey, we better transfer this money, these crypto holdings offline or to a cold wallet." And so that certainly demonstrates the need for, not just interpreting the data and the use of the information, but making the right human decisions.
That's right. I mean, that's absolutely right. You were saying, when I said in the introduction to the case of Singapore about 5 million people, and you said Bahamas about 400,000. But also there's there's the technology may help in the detection phase, but thereafterwards the response to it, as shown in Singapore, and the example you've just given, is it's humans who say we must do this and we must do it very quickly. The technologies don't have that ability at this point in time, and I would argue probably unless somebody connects them together, we'll never have that ability to say, now we need to make this change and we can do that one, and hey, let's check with the legal guys. And I think this shows that the range of stakeholders and institutions that are involved, and for all practical purposes, as far as we can see at the moment, it's humans that manage these interactions between institutions to protect it, first of all, the reputation of an individual country, Bahamas, Singapore, but also to protect the global financial ecosystem, which is what bodies like Bank of Settlements and Financial Action Task Force say they're doing. Here's a couple of questions now. Karen says, with respect to the idea of regulating the proximity of the relationship between audit firm and client, what do you think would be the most effective vehicle for global recognition of that need? I don't know if you can see the questions yourself, Kendrick.
No. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. With respect to the idea of regulating the proximity of the relationship between audit and firms and their clients, what's the most effective vehicle for global recognition of the need to regulate the proximity? Now, I think that perhaps question from Karen comes when you were talking about the 7-year idea.
Right. Right. No, that's a good question. I mean, there's always this, I guess, paradigm between the auditor being a business and one and obviously wanting to make a profit from that engagement with the client, but also having a need to do the audit properly. And I always sort of brag to my young accountants about the fact that an audit has to be done 100%. You know, we compare ourselves. You know, every profession has these war stories, and we compare ourselves to surgeons. That we can't do the surgeon 50% because the person didn't pay. You know, or we have to do the audit properly, meaning that it has to hold up scrutiny in the case of peer review by a local body in the Bahamas or an international you know, body as well. But that is a good, you know, there is a concern that auditors may, you know, really cut cost or cut corners in an audit, or for whatever reason may make determinations that may, you know, potentially impact a client's financials negatively because of over influence, or you know, or even under the table, you know, under the table activities. I mean, everybody's susceptible. We can't say the auditing profession is not susceptible to that, right? And so I say that to say that I the example of the U.S. with the PCOB, you know, they formed a public oversight body that's funded by the accounting firms, and that comes in and basically has a layer of investigation and also gathering information to help auditors, you know, sort of understand when it's time to come off an engagement, or you know, to learn from the experience. And you know, in the case of the Bahamas and other entities, we subscribe to the IFAC, you know, International Federation of Accountants, and they have the international standards on auditing. Those are very robust, but I would say that there may be need to have another body similar to that one in the U.S. Learning from the obviously mistakes made with that entity, and you know, I know in the case of the U.S. firms, they really take pride, or at least should take pride in ensuring that they're not preparing on the PCOB, in, you know, any lists that come out with negative, you know, with things that have been you know, they found to be wanting in those audit firms. So, but we are highly regulated. You know, for instance, you know, the firms in the Bahamas, accounting firms are regulated by the Bahamas Institute of Chartered Accountants, which does peer reviews, requires continuing education for all of the partners and the you know, partners and licensees. And then we also have international firms that come in and review. But I would say to you, there may be a need for targeted where there's another entity that perhaps can monitor independence, right? Because you know, that is the very hallmark of the profession with the external auditing, that you are independent and that you've done it, you know, technically correct.
Yes, and I think we were talking a little earlier about perceptions, the perceptions that employees have if it's an internal forensic analysis, or it's carried out by somebody externally. There's also the perception that auditors or the public will have of auditors as a profession, and the perception that it needs, as you say, whilst it's regulated, there are often temptations, only human. Technology doesn't succumb to those kind of human temptations, but the idea of international standards for accounting, as you say. Shervin rather asks about fraud that results from cyber attack, and what I'm not quite sure what lies behind the question. It's only a very short one. Have you experienced fraud as a result of cyber attack? It says.
Well, yeah, that, you know, certainly, I think the cybercrime and fraud and cybercrime went up in general by about 92%, according to the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, over the pandemic. And I guess everybody could sort of figure that one out. You know, you had a lot of people with a lot of time on their hands. Everybody could watch The Last Dance with Michael Jordan, and you know,
Yeah.
and so a lot of folks turned to their computers, and you know, financial constraints too. A lot of persons were let go. And so that resulted in a lot of cybercrime activity. So yeah, we do have seen instances. I mean, the Bahamas, just like any other country, we've had clients who've been subject to ransomware attacks. Usually we coming in after the fact, because they, a lot of it, the culture in the Bahamas sometimes of being a very smaller country is to keep things, to the point where, keep things internally, because there's a very, if it gets out, it makes persons very concerned. If you have an incident that happens in Florida, you may never hear, and even in today's age with social media, of course, we have to bear in mind, but you may not hear about that incident in Atlanta, in California, or in some other state, right? And certainly in the Bahamas, we're being called in. So we same like we see also website attacks, what you call DDoS, flooding attacks, where someone tries to take down a website. We don't see a lot of cybercrime, activity. At least recently, we haven't heard about any, but we have seen some elements of the love, you call the love romance games. A lot of persons have been, built out of hundreds of thousands of dollars by romance game. It's a bit of cybercrime. Persons, taking on the identity of someone else. And so there's a lot of that. It's oftentimes a lot of that is not reported because of embarrassment, and
Yes.
because of the realization that it'd be very difficult to get your money back in those
Yeah.
scams. And we continue to educate the public, but for everybody to be educated, there's always someone that comes along and fight and tells you that that person that wants 100,000 and never met you, doesn't want to see you, is real. So the heart,
Yeah.
the human
Yes.
side, Stephen, the human side, love is a serious thing, and so AI will probably never get that love element, because human beings
No.
fall for love and emotion more than anything else. They fall for that, and yeah. So cybercrime certainly occurs, and we are trying to really get the word out to companies to show up their cyber activity, their anti cybercrime activities. You have deep fakes now. In the old days, you'll just get an email, a phishing attack, and you click on it. Now you get a video coming from Stephen. It looks like Stephen. It talks like Stephen. It says transfer $100,000 to my account. And so, people were getting defrauded with the simple email. What about an email now with a video that's a deep fake, and has all the mannerisms of Stephen or Kendrick? And so, yeah,
Yeah. And of course,
there's
there are some
certainly.
people. There are some people who say if they see me real live, that will definitely put them off giving me 100 grand. But that's by the by.
Right,
So there are a
right.
couple of observations. Patrick Mazambuco says we've talked about the risks of AI in the context of fraud. And Patrick says the total exclusion of human beings may lead to some risks. Yep, we've been talking about that. And
Yes,
there's still
yes,
a need for
yes,
human intervention. So Patrick
yes.
seems either due to our conversation or because he already had that view, sees the need for a human intervention. What happens here now? Well, Paul says, thanks for the wonderful insights. Can human and technology coexist for the foreseeable future? Well, one of the things is, Paul, Patrick says in the post above, total exclusion of humans could lead to risks. There may be some need for human intervention. One last thought, just before we draw things to a close, Kendrick. Can humans and technology, an absolute clear statement. I think we've been on this one before, but humans and technology exist for the foreseeable future.
Yes, definitely. I mean, I take it akin to an airplane ride. We all know that, pilots sit in the cockpit and basically, well, hopefully don't go to sleep, but they basically watch the controls for about, I couldn't, don't quote me on it, but I think it's about 85% of the flight, takeoff and landing and anything else. But, there was a question came out as to whether persons would be comfortable in riding a plane that had no human pilot. And I must say I was satisfied to see that persons, a lot more people were not comfortable with that thought, and that if something were to truly go wrong, would you want to be up in the sky with just the AI, the artificial or the cockpit control, taking over, and with no humans to sort of sort it out, and because they could come up with a whole lot of things that that the computer could not come up with. That the computer probably would just be looking at the normal stuff, but a human being can put together a solution that grandma would have told them 50 years ago. But so that sort of relationship to me is what we're going to see. The pilot is there, and we're monitoring, and the AI is doing the work, but we are there because we're there also not only to react in the case of a problem, but also to enhance the system, check it, and make sure that it's not unfair. And certainly that's the relationship we want. I certainly I don't want to be seen as an old fogey who says to you, fight the system. And no, I embrace cryptocurrency. I embrace Bitcoin. I embrace ChatGPT. I think we need to know about these forms of this technology. Throw the old technology to some extent, like checkbooks and beepers and all of that, right? But certainly the human persona and the way that we think is not capable of being replicated entirely now. And I think that in the essence of fairness, and that we need to ensure that humans are involved in all cases.
Indeed, we're not going to have a competition about who's the oldest fogey against different things, because I'm a great believer.
That was just a statement.
But that leads us to the conclusion that Tricia Nicholas says, how do you best deal with false positives or possibly minimize them? Well, we've heard from Kendrick that technology will learn from itself, artificial intelligence will learn from itself, and in that regard, perhaps false positives will be reduced in number, but the minimizing the impact of false positives, I think the general conclusion from Kendrick, from some of the things that I talked about a little earlier, from the Financial Action Task Force, Bank for International Settlements, Financial Conduct Authority, etc., says there needs to be human input and insight. And in our chat area, Paul and Patrick seem to be recognizing, hey, there's a role for all of us. There's a role for human forensic specialists like Kendrick, and for people who have studied programs, studied qualifications, that allows me to thank Kendrick for his contribution. I'm sure we'll be in touch again, Kendrick, and then just ask Shoned to put the final slide up about how you could gain an insight if you're not already a graduate of Bangor's. The next slide, Shoned or Nick, that shows the program. I'll talk whilst the slide comes up. Is it appearing on people's screen but not on mine? No, here it comes. Here we are. In Bangor Business School, we have, there we go, in Bangor Business School, we have a number of routes for you to gain insight, particularly to aspects of financial crime. We have a program, our longest running one, Chartered Banker MBA, which is a dual qualification, the only one in the world globally. MBA from a traditional university, ourselves Bangor, and a Chartered Banker designation from the Chartered Banker Institute in Edinburgh. The one that may seem most relevant to what we're talking about today, MBA Financial Crime and Compliance. It again is groundbreaking, unique in the world. MBA from Bangor, traditional university, and the Financial Intelligence Specialist designation from our partner in Toronto, Canada, Manchester CF. Those are full programs. You can get exemptions on to those programs depending on what you've studied before. You can also take individual modules as single modules in either of those programs, particularly because many of you will be in the situation where you're in work, in busy, demanding jobs. You need to have a social life, you have family, etc., to engage with them, friends, and you may want to come and take a single module from these programs, single module study that is a way to meet CPD requirements, to pick up knowledge in a particular area, or to get a taste. Am I able to study at this level? So we're here. The next slide I think gives our contact details. We have a spring intake open. There are some scholarships available for the full programs. The contact details are there. Do please get in touch if you have an interest. Sinead, Lisa will be happy to respond. Jade is also in this in this chat somewhere to respond to your questions. There's a famous quotation that those who fail to learn the lessons of history and to understand how they apply today are likely to repeat those disasters, those mistakes. So it's all about education. We have a tradition since 1884 of providing education. Bangor University was the first university in the UK to offer a degree, an undergraduate degree in banking and finance. And since then, we've continued to be led by the market into areas where people who have finished their conventional straight from school studies, undergraduate, postgraduate, whatever it be, needing continuous updating in a professional context in a manner which has a recognition of the need for application and the need for balance. You can't always come to the UK for study. Our programs have been running for 12 years, over 1,000 graduates from 100 countries. We're very pleased to receive any inquiries that you have on those addresses there. Thanks for all the comments in the chat area. Thanks particularly to Kendrick for his insight there. And join us again. Watch out for the announcement that talks about the next one, which I think is, where are we, in May? And it's on the subject of human talent. Hey, that's all of us. Thanks so much, Kendrick. See you again soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Lisa.
There we go.
Thank you.